Hello, Ethics and Values 024 608 and 602. And so we meet again for the last time in the time of pandemic and isolation and fear. It's been a real whirlwind, roller coaster, hasn't it? They're in Disneyland, which we were going to go to like in March before they closed. We actually decided not to go like a day or two before they closed. We came to kind of the same conclusion, but in Disneyland they have something. They have a roller coaster designed for Inside Out, and I thought it was a really bad advertising choice to not call that the emotional roller coaster. And because they didn't, they called it something else. I think they called it the emotional whirlwind, which kind of boils down to the same thing, I guess. But that's what we've been going through, is an emotional roller coaster, an emotional whirlwind. And so, what do you do in a roller coaster and a whirlwind? Well, first of all, what's in common between those two? Well, you could say that both of them involve your feet being taken off the ground. It involves losing your sense of groundedness, of direction, of orientation, of where you are. And that's what's happened. All of us have lost the ground underneath our feet. We don't know what we can trust. We don't know who we can trust. We don't know if we can trust our own bodies. Where do we find the orienting point? Where do we find the center? What stands still when everything else shakes? Because in a sense, that's what this class has been about. It's been about what is real and what isn't. There's a book, I actually have it here, it's called A Course in Miracles. A channeled book, actually, supposedly channeled the voice of God. You can believe that if you want to or not. But it actually, I'll just pull it up here really quickly. Hang on just a minute or two. This is a spinning bookshelf, if I haven't mentioned that yet. Is it in this one? I hope it's in this one. It's a big fat book, you'll see it. And anyway, this book, it's one of the most brilliant books you'll ever see. Where is it? I could just summarize it if I don't find it soon. Oh, here it is. It's blue. I was looking for black. But it's blue. By the way, A Course in Miracles was transcribed very quickly, and it's very eloquent, but the author or the transcriber really could not really understand what was in it. So it's a really bizarre thing. So this is the introduction, basically. It basically summarizes this whole Course in Miracles by saying this. And I think this is the key in what this class is about in 2 lines. Nothing real can be threatened, and nothing unreal exists. Let that sit for a little bit. Those 2 lines are filled with power. Nothing real can be threatened, and nothing unreal exists. Well, of course, have you ever seen something unreal before? You may have seen your dreams before, but those dreams when you're in them are real. You may have read a fiction book, but in the words of Dumbledore, of course it's happening inside your head, like the Harry Potter books are. Why should that mean it's not real? Everything is real by virtue of the fact that you're here experiencing it. And you are real. And I am real. And because we're real and all of this is real, none of it can be hurt. None of it can be threatened. I get the feeling that our fear comes from the feeling that what is real can be threatened. But whatever happens when what happens when the thing you fear happens? It's like, oh, in a sense, it's like you're still here. And the fear may be, in a sense, still stuck in your body, but the fear is of something unreal. And so fear is really the real problem, because fear is based on a lie that what is real can be threatened. But it can't. And nothing exists that is unreal. We could say, furthermore, that the solution to well-being in this pandemic depends on finding the firm center that is contained in those two lines. Nothing real can be threatened, and nothing unreal exists. Think about that. Feel it. And realize that you can't grow a cubit or a foot by your own willpower. It might happen, it might not. But none of your worrying can save it, can fix it, can accomplish that growth. You might worry about tomorrow, but the worries never help you tackle tomorrow. In fact, they often hinder it. Worry is not a good strategy. Worry is wasted energy. It favors, in a sense, the unreal, what isn't here yet, over the real. And so forfeits a feeling of security. It forfeits a feeling of security that would be there if you acknowledged reality for a sense of fear that comes from a delusion that what is real could be hurt, but it can't. No need to panic. No need to fret. You're here, and so am I. And you can't imagine ever not being here. Just try. Try to imagine not existing. You can't do it. And it may happen that when you die, you do stop existing. But when you stop existing, you won't be there to imagine it, if that's indeed what happens. So no need to fear. What is real can't be threatened. But we could ask further, what is reality? And how do we distinguish it from what is unreal? Because nothing unreal exists. Well, we could put it this way. What is real is what is essential. But what does it mean to say that what is real is essential? What does it mean to talk about the essential? Well, let me put it this way, and we're going to go kind of into number 2 here, 2 and 3, the lessons, themes, and motifs. That's what we've been kind of covering in these few minutes. The essential is, or can be illustrated by this. When you look at the sun circling over your head, spinning around the earth, is it actually spinning around the earth? From your perspective, it certainly is, but is it really? I would argue that the sun is the essential in this illustration, and the appearance that it is circling you is the inessential. And reality and the peace of what is real comes from acknowledging that the accidents of where you happen to be standing can let you see things poorly and conclude from what you see that something unreal exists, but it doesn't. And so, the peace of knowing that what is real is can't be threatened comes from knowing what is real. And what is real is the essential. And I would argue that what is real, the essential, is that which does not depend on perspective. That which does not depend on where you happen to be standing and looking. Now let's think about that for a little bit. What does that mean? Let's say that you wake up today in a bad mood. You think, I'm a terrible person. Or maybe more relevantly, you think the world is dying. The economy is dying. The civilization is falling apart. The end of the world is here. Well, have you felt that way every day this week? Well, maybe you have. But chances are you haven't. And you'll find that on the days where you don't despair, you'll be able to think more clearly and to think just plain more than you do when you are despairing. There is, in a sense, an elevation, like on a mountain, over these despairing thoughts when you're able to think more clearly. You're able to survey, so to speak, these despairing thoughts in a way you can't when you're in the middle of them. Like when you get to the top of Mount Timpanogos, you can see Utah Valley as a whole, even though you can't when you're in it. And so I could say that, as with the illustration, that the sun is the essential, or rather the reality of the sun being the center is the essential, and the illusion that it is circling the earth is the inessential. The center of the sunness is right here, but the illusion is here. I would argue that peace comes from transcending the illusions of perspective. And in the case of waking up with dark thoughts, it comes from realizing that always, I would argue, despair comes from being lower down here, and that pure joy comes from truth. Remember, I said that once in a class, that truth and goodness are always found together, because you'll find that your negative thoughts and your negative feelings always come from the assumption that what is true could be bad, that what is true could hurt you, that what is true could be hurt. But remember, nothing real can be threatened. What is true is good and is safe. The perception of unsafety comes from being down here. The feeling of safety comes from being up here. And this isn't ascending in your ivory tower above everything. No. This is the feeling that I am together with everything in a way that I don't have to fret over. Because how often, this is the Buddhist idea, do we cling to things? Do we say mine? Because we're afraid that if we don't do that, if we don't inhale our breath, it'll go away and it'll never come back. But it always does come back. Being up here is realizing that you can safely breathe, even if you're standing still. Being down here is realizing, in a false way, that you have to chase after your breath and always try to hold it in. But that's a lie. What is real can't be threatened. And what is unreal doesn't exist. The unreal is the lie that the sun circles around the earth. What is real is the truth that the sun is the center. And we could say on the same point, to say almost the same thing, what is real is the truth that what is real is safe. And what is unreal is the lie that the real is capable of being heard. And so you see the logic here, perhaps. And so you immediately get intimations of the themes I've been trying to trace in this class. Remember how we began. I had you watch that video of the Stanley Parable, all 3 sections. And what ends up happening in it? He is facing death. Stanley. He's facing the enormous metal jaws that are going to squish him. But in the moment of death, a second narrator takes over. Stanley watched as the enormous metal jaws crushed him, obliterating him instantly. But then he drops. It's interesting. And here's what that means in this context, is that the whole perspective, the whole game, and I use that word deliberately, that he has to find the exit, do whatever he's going to do in the game, is all down here. He doesn't see the big picture. That's what the first narrator says. He'll never understand what it means. He's like, he says this death might be like plucking the eyeballs from a blind man and doesn't do anything. But what happens when you pluck the eyeballs from a blind man? Certainly he doesn't lose anything. Maybe when you pluck the eyeballs from a blind man, you can come to peace with the fact that you were never going to see in the first place. Or maybe to put it in another way that makes more sense, you could say that what happens when Stanley is being led to the machines is he's realizing that this perspective isn't real. And then when he finds the second narrator, he ascends beyond it. And then here's the brilliant thing, is that she says the only way to beat this game is to push escape and press quit. That is to realize you've always already been here, in the real world, not as Stanley, but as the player behind the monitor in front of the keyboard. You are not Stanley. Stanley can be killed. Stanley, blind and incomprehending, can have his eyeballs plucked out or be squished, but you won't. You're safe behind the computer. You are real and cannot be threatened. Stanley is unreal and therefore doesn't exist. You see the logic here. Or we could think of Plato's allegory of the cave. What did he say? He says that those people in the cave, I'll illustrate it for you. So there's this cave here, and then there's this causeway where these figures are walking over, and then these people down here are watching something, the shadows cast by a fire here on the wall here, and they think that the shadows are the reality, but the shadows are always two-dimensional. They don't make sense because all of a sudden they'll turn one way and turn the other way, and there's something missing. You know there's something missing. You know that this thing is like tracing the different aspects of something that is real, the different side, because when you turn around, the shadow changes shape inexplicably. And how often is reality like that? How often does reality not make sense? But Plato's argument is that reality isn't, the world we see around us isn't really real. It's shadows. And of course it's shadows, because we see them with our eyes. We only ever see one side at a time. We see the sun moving across the sky and we think it circles us, but it actually is at the center. We only see shadows. We only see the unreal. What is unreal doesn't exist. And so, when the person in the cave transcends the cave, goes into the sunlight, and realizes that these shadows were shadows, and that the real reality, the three-dimensional reality, exists in and with the sun, he realizes that the whole game of shadows he's been playing is unreal. And what is unreal can be threatened, but it doesn't exist. And what is real can't be threatened. And so, I also showed you the Tao Te Ching, and I could have taught that lesson better, but I showed you with Emerson's self-reliance, and I would argue that these two pieces are arguing much the same thing, as well as what Plato's Allegory of the Cave and Stanley Parable are arguing, namely that reality has many sides. But reality, when we see it, is only one-sided. Reality, with its many sides, in the sense that the sun doesn't just circle us, but appears to all the different planets and all the different areas of the Earth, is many-sided. The sun is many-sided, and so everything is. And reality is many-sided. And if reality doesn't make sense in the way that Stanley couldn't make sense of the game, or that the prisoners couldn't make sense of the shadows, it's because this world is unreal. In the same way that the sun circling the Earth is unreal. But when we circle around it, when we take all the different perspectives and try to piece them together, we get a glimpse of the sun at the center, being on the top of the mountain and being unable to be heard. Transcending illusion. Becoming aware of the ways we are not vulnerable. The ways we can't be wounded. And so, I would encourage you to forsake doubt, to get rid of doubt. What do I mean by that? I would encourage you to stop doubting your own well-being. Stop giving away your authority to doubt. How often do we think, I can't be okay because of X, Y, or Z worry, or X, Y, or Z thing someone's going to say about me, etc. Let me let in the cat. Hang on just a minute here. So I was saying that how often do we worry about everything? How often do we give our authority and our well-being away to what other people say, to what could be, but isn't here yet, to abstractions, to what other people are saying, to what someone else says about me? How often do we give away our well-being to the outside? That's a kind of doubt. But you can't doubt what's real. Or you can, but it's a bad idea. So don't. Don't doubt what's real. Don't go from the mountain to the bottom where you can't see anything. Don't doubt the good. Don't doubt the truth. Feel the safety that they give you. I reference Harry Potter a lot, and this is the brilliant idea behind the Patronus and the Dementors. The Dementors are this feeling here, the feeling of despair that swallows you, that tries to suck your life force. But remember that you can't fight the Patronus on your own. You need a patron, a protector. And that patron and that protector is light. Is, more specifically, something that is always true, that you do not doubt. And this doesn't mean, necessarily, that from one perspective something is true, and from one perspective it can't be true. That is very real, and it reflects the multi-sidedness of reality. But that shouldn't be an excuse to doubt. Don't doubt the sun. Don't descend from here. Even if you acknowledge that what protected you might be unreal from one perspective, don't forsake the protection it gave you. The light in it, the way that it brought you that perspective, should not be thrown away like a baby with the bathwater. Let truth protect you, and truth will keep you safe, because nothing real, nothing true can be hurt, in the same way that a Patronus, the real, defeats the Dementor, the unreal. He died. Let's look at her, shall we? Hey, Dottie, Dottie, Dottie. Dottie, 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 Dottie. Hey, Dottie. You wanted to see my birds. Well, I won't take them out of the cage right now because that's a bad idea, but I'll show them to you. Here are the birds. See them? There you go. Don't look behind the birds. That's an unsightly part of my room. That's a traveling cage in the case we ever need to bug out, and I just want to save the birds, kind of like Noah's Ark or whatever. Yeah. Standing desk, as you can see. I've been on it before. And so, I would argue this class has been a lesson, at least an attempted lesson, in going from here to here. Because this is how I interpret the name of this class: ethics and values. Ethics and values is about the good. It's about what can't be hurt. Because when you do what's right, you stand at the top of the mountain. You stand in your own conscience, in your own inner authority, in your own Patronus, as it were. And what is true and what is good does not just help you, it helps others around you. It infects the world like a virus, pardon the pun, but a good virus. Good deeds multiply. True thoughts multiply. And the more we act with that inner light, the Patronus, the more we become radiant little suns that turn the world into something better, to make the world more aware of its own inherent safety. Wittgenstein, a philosopher we should have read but didn't, once said that someone who views life in a certain way could walk through a battlefield without feeling any fear. In fact, there's a book that Wittgenstein wrote that we should have read some of, but we didn't. It's called the Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus. A really pretentious sounding name, but it wasn't his idea. Hang on just a minute here. You can probably see my butt crack, but that's okay. Where is it? I haven't looked at this for a long time. I should have. Tractatus. There it is. Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus. Ostensibly, apparently, a book about logic, but really a book about mysticism and life and ethics and values. It's a book about logical mysticism. Imagine that. Let me read to you some quotes from it that are really related to these ideas. Not how the world is the mystical, contemplation of the world from the perspective of eternity is its contemplation as a limited whole. The feeling of the world as a limited whole is the mystical feeling. So what does that mean? I would argue what he's saying is that to view the world as something that is to view it from here, is to view it as a limited whole, is to view it as something that you are in a sense above, in the sense that the sun is above the earth. It continues, for an answer which cannot be expressed, the question too cannot be expressed. The riddle does not exist. If a question can be put at all, then it can be answered. Skepticism is not irrefutable, but doesn't make any sense if it would doubt where a question cannot be asked. For doubt can only exist when there is a question only where there is an answer, and this only where something can be said. We feel that even if all possible scientific questions be answered, the problems of life have still not been touched at all. Of course, there is then no question left, but just this is the answer. The solution of the problem of life is seen in the vanishing of this problem. There is indeed the inexpressible. This shows itself. It is the mystical. It continues later by saying, my propositions, this book, are elucidatory or show the world in this way. He who understands me finally recognizes them as senseless, as nonsense, when he has climbed out through them, on them, over them. He must, so to speak, throw away the ladder after he has climbed up upon it. He must surmount these propositions. He must climb above them. Then he sees the world rightly. And then the last line of the book, which is really famous, whereof one cannot speak, thereof one must be silent. What is he saying here? I think he's saying this thing, which is that reality, the real world, is something that insofar as you talk about it, isn't the real world. Language, in a sense, can give us a picture of the world, but isn't the world. And so, how often when we're here, when we're thinking negative thoughts, when we are thinking, oh, I'm a terrible person, and then because you're thinking I'm a terrible person, you think I'm a terrible person for thinking that thought. And then it's just darkness multiplying. How often do we do that because of language? Because we're trapped in shadows, in the traces of meaning, and not what created the meaning, not what arranged the words. Meaning lives in three-dimensionality, in many perspectives, looking at the arrangement of the words and the complex of meanings that live in it. But your negative thoughts will pick out one of those meanings and accuse you with it. Stuck down here. Just in a limited, blind perspective of the unreal, the sun circling the earth. But when you're up here, when you transcend the one-sidedness to the many-sidedness, you see that nothing real can be hurt, and that whereof one cannot speak, this you have to be silent about. I would disagree with Wittgenstein maybe about that a little bit. I would say that maybe you can be silent about it, yes, but maybe you don't have to be. What I'm trying to do in this class is to not talk about it, but to circle around it. To not be content with a single point of view, because any single point of view would trap that unspeakable thing, this reality at the top of the mountain. And life is that. Life is that which we can't express, and therefore we can't doubt. It lives in us. It is in our bones, our blood, the air we breathe in and out. It is the real, and nothing real can be heard. And even though the world is becoming more and more dangerous, people are retreating into themselves and into their own houses, socially isolating, you can't be heard, because you are real. I wrote a play that articulated, oh, and here's the secret word, by the way. Silence. Silence, S-I-L-E-N-C-E, silence. Email that to me and I'll give you your attendance. Actually, turns out I was not supposed to be tracking attendance because I didn't include it in the syllabus. So I guess you get a free pass. I should have, I mean, it's kind of a rock and a hard place. I fully intended to track attendance. I did. I just didn't include it in the syllabus. But it's like, do I trade what's on the syllabus, give you points or take away points, and why not track attendance? Here's what I'm going to do. Attendance will be extra credit. So email this to me, okay? I guess you could say that this class has been about climbing the mountain, about learning about what can only be expressed through many perspectives, because it sees many perspectives. Learning about life, and it can be hard to express in like a class catalog. And so I've tried to be as honest as I can, but sometimes it feels like I'm trying to cram lots of things into a small category that won't have it. But who cares? I certainly don't. I feel like I've done good things here. I do feel that. I feel as if together we have ascended, at least some of us, maybe all of us, a little bit more beyond what we are troubled by in this area, and gone up here by looking at what these figures, or what these books, or what these ideas have to teach us about what is true, what is good, and what is real. Don't doubt it. Now I guess I can say this. I would encourage you to, with this lack of doubt, this Patronus, as it were, to infect the world with goodness. Go into the world, even if it's online, and radiate truth. Radiate goodness. Only you can decide what that means. But let the world be infected by your infectious beauty, truth, and goodness. I love you. I love all of you. And I want you to be happy, and I know some of you aren't. And that makes me sad. I would encourage you to abandon that unhappiness as much as you can by clinging to what is true, doing what is good, and finding the beautiful in all of it, acknowledging that nothing unreal exists, and nothing real can be heard. Okay? And so, let's talk a little bit about logistic stuff. Your final paper is due this Friday. It's basically just a paper, 3 to 4 pages long, I think. If it says something different in the syllabus, do that. About something you deeply believe in. I will be very lenient about the format. I want your force to go into it. I don't want you to be limited by structure. I want you to think through it. Yes? I want you to feel through it more. Feeling is important, as we've alluded to. And there will be a final exam. I guess we have to, and it's in the syllabus. The final exam will be like the midterm, and it will be given out a week from today, I believe. That's what it says on the syllabus. I think the 27th is when I'll give it out, and you'll have finals week to do it. Okay? So, I love you with all the force I have, so to speak. But, you're free to go at this point, but I'm going to read you another story. How does that sound? Probably just a short one. Called The Labyrinth. Those few... Oh, there's someone at the door. But someone else is going to get it. And those are the dogs. Let's wait for them to be done. And the birds are freaking out. Cat's okay. Cat's a little jittery, I guess. She's like, she's on alert, whatever. Cats don't chirp, I guess. Those few born within the boundaries of Pleasant Grove have the details of the labyrinth indelibly embossed on a mental map, given full and clear in their mind's eye. It is given in such detail that they can wander its paths very nearly with their physical eyes closed. Lying thousands of feet below Lake Bonneville alluvium in the Permian Kirkland limestone, the labyrinth conforms exactly to all of Pleasant Grove's municipal borders, east, west, north, and south. The maze is decidedly of ancient origin, although those who claim to have visited it are reluctant to speak of it openly. Its existence opens troubling metaphysical questions. Was the town laid out with reference to the labyrinth? How could those borders have been relevant in pioneer days, before anyone had found the maze or wandered its passages? No one has offered a sensible answer. This shared knowledge of the subterranean caverns twists and turns among the children born in Pleasant Grove. It is not a large number, since there is no hospital within the city proper. Suddenly find, as they approach their 18th birthday, that their memory of the passages begins to fade. Only by visiting the maze can the memories be seared into permanence and retained into adulthood, or so it is said. It is also said that on a young man or woman's 18th birthday the knowledge of the maze evaporates. However, the departing map leaves a strange hollow space, a longing or a sense of lack that troubles and confuses the adults who are left forsaken by its traces. The missing memory leaves a moribund emptiness, like a quarry pit that has been mined of something important and left to fill with rain and muck. However, those who have yet to pass that age earmarked for the destruction of these mental imprints instinctively do not speak of them to their parents. Rather, they use elaborate codes and misdirection to cloak their conversations when anything about that mysterious place is discussed among friends. If by some means you do make it down to those cavernous depths, you will never forget its existence. Its recollections are yours to keep, and they are retained into old age. And as it is for the children, the entire labyrinth is manifest, placed by whatever force or power instills it within the hearts and minds of the children. And make no mistake that it is both the hearts and the minds, for not only are they able to visualize the courses through the heart of the tunnels, but a feeling of longing and desire accompanies even the most casual recall of those paths. The entrance is always hidden. It is known to move to and fro through the city, never staying in the same place for long. So if it is found, a decision must be made to enter the dark and hidden shaft, or likely forever regret your lack of courage and fortitude. There is one oddity in all this, While the circuit through the labyrinth itself is crystal clear, the center, a circle nearly a quarter of a mile in diameter, is masked and shrouded from your mental image's view. No one knows what paths may be found therein. However, even in the memories embossed in the minds of the children so graced, there emanates from that dark blotch an oppressive fear, a warning, perhaps, clearly a suggestion that something dark and treacherous wanders those halls. For that minority who make it inside the heart of the maze, what occurs there is forgotten. It is a mystery always concealed. At age 17, my friends and I were obsessed with the maze. We spoke of little else. We sensed that time was running out. Of course, to our parents, it sounded like we were talking about Jethro Tull, or Black Sabbath, the Bee Gees, or Cat Stevens, perhaps. Discussions about their songs would spill from our lips with a frequency that would have been unseemly if we were actually speaking of rock bands, but these were our coded allusions to the various passages, turns, sections, and paths through the labyrinth. I was returning from a high school dance one night, alone. My then girlfriend had broken up with me and had left with her friends. I drank a beer, those were rebellious times, and I was not alone among the Mormon youth who would occasionally sneak a drink, even though such was forbidden by our faith. Suddenly, a large orange cat crossed my path. It stopped and snarled at me viciously. Then the hellish beast, for hellish it was, its eyes too large and its teeth too uneven and crocodile-like and deadly-looking, leaped into a large hole at the base of an old maple. I peered into the cavity, and it seemed large enough that I should have noticed it before, as I had walked this path for years while making my way from home to school and back again. Then I knew. Without question or doubt, I knew it was the entrance to the labyrinth. I hesitated. I wanted to tell my friends. I wanted to shout for help, to tell someone, but I was alone, and I knew it was now or never. I got on my hands and knees and crawled inside. As I cleared the entrance, I immediately encountered room to stand upright and found myself on a roadway, for it was a roadway, very wide and paved with cobbles that plunged down steeply. It was lit by strange translucent orbs, giving off an eerie green glow placed about every 30 feet. Although I was nearly running, it took ages to get to the bottom. I jogged down and down, knowing that the maze was somewhere below. About every mile or so it would do a 180-degree turn, like a staircase going back and forth between the floors. Occasionally I would glimpse the cat, or more likely just its tail, but it appeared to be keeping just ahead of me. Then there I was. The floor flattened and I stood within the maze. There was a peculiar feeling of coming home about it. That is to say, a familiarity, a welcoming, and sense that this is where I belonged. The air was cool and dry and smelled of old stones and clean water. I knew where I was. I moved forward with confidence, straight down Benny and the Jets, past the entrance to Aqualung and Horse with No Name, right on to Average White Band, then past Moonshadow, and left on Stayin' Alive, left again on Led Zeppelin, then two rights until I hit You're So Vain. On and on I flew. 1,000 times we had talked about what we would do if we found ourselves in the maze. Here I was. There was nothing to decide. Just making my way to its heart was the only goal. What else could I do? At last I stood before the mysterious blotch in the center. There was no obvious marker. Don't Fear the Reaper seemed to continue straight on ahead. The green globes, still casting their unearthly light, lined up until a slight turn took them away. I took a step forward, then back again to see if I would be allowed to back up out of the area that had always been blanked out in our mental map. There was no problem with changing direction or backtracking. The way was fairly straight, and I detected no change of feeling or warning doubt. Finally, the end of the path, which had no side passages, there was a large wooden door, like something you would see in a castle, with a large iron ring in its center. Kneeling before it, as if forsaken, was a young woman playing a hurdy-gurdy, turning the crank and plucking the strings. She did not appear to notice me, as she was weeping hysterically. The cat I had been following came up to her as if it knew her, and began to rub its head and body against her. She stopped playing and scratched the large feline across its head. She looked to be about my age. She was petite and pretty, with hair so fine and silky it looked otherworldly. It was like no hair I'd ever seen. She was wearing a miniskirt and an ABBA band t-shirt. Her ears were small, and in the scant light hinted at being somewhat pointed at the tip. Her face was angular, with high cheekbones and a delicate, well-shaped nose. Her pale skin was almost translucent, and soft blue veins were hinted at beneath the clear skin of her lovely face and forehead. She looked up at me, her eyes wide and startled, and said, "Are you real?" I assured her I was, and she jumped up and ran to me with such swiftness that I could not have gotten away if I wanted to. When she reached me, she hugged me fiercely, crying even more than before, if that was possible. She told me through her sobs that she had been down here for weeks. I asked her what she had to eat or drink, and she stepped back very defensively and said, "You do not want to know." I did not press it. It must be said that as soon as her tears fell on me, I was thoroughly and helplessly in love. I'd never felt like this, but she suddenly became so dear and so beautiful that I could not imagine ever being away from her again. It felt like my breath had been stolen, and there was nothing left than to ask her to take my whole life and do whatever she pleased. I'd heard of love at first sight, but this could not have been what they meant, for this was so powerful and so far beyond that simple description. She stayed beside me and held my hand. Her scent was like the sea, no, like a meadow of fresh wildflowers. No, it was like fresh snow in a forest of firs high in the Uintas at Christmas time. I lack words, but I pity you that have never had this scent waft over you. She told me that she thought the way out was through that door, but that there was a horrible monster behind it. Every time she had tried to pass through it, it had rushed at her. I did not question this. Her voice carried the truth in the way that brokered no doubts. Like the love I had thrust upon me by her presence, I was unable to even attempt to question what she said. I did try to get her to articulate the threat, not quite believing that it was a genuine monster so much as a metaphorical one, but she would only cower and begin again to weep. I told her I would begin to go and check it out. "Take this," she said, and ran back to her instrument, and beside it was a sword. I had not noticed. The sword appeared made for my hand. It felt good, better than the wooden ones we played knights with when we were young. Its edge was sharp, sharper than I would have ever expected, sharper than a razor. I felt protected, and she hugged me and kissed me on the lips and told me, "Be careful." I felt valiant and chivalrous as I opened the door with an undaunted swagger and boldness. Once I had unlatched that great opening by twisting the great ring in the center of the door, I strode in and loudly challenged whatever beast dwelled within. It opened to a cavernous room, more like an arena or rodeo grounds. The lights within were not green, but a dim amber, making it difficult to get my bearings and discover my surroundings. She slipped in behind me and said again, "Be careful." Then it came. I know this will sound fantastic. You will not believe it, but I swear what I say is true. From a side passage strode a man of such stature that I had never seen his like in real life, not even in the movies. Muscles stood out from his skin like knotted and twisted cables, and there was more comic book hero about his body than human actuality. But as he approached, I quailed in fear at the unreality coming at me, for against all experience, save in books of myth, he had the massive head of a bull. He bellowed me and charged, but it was the scream behind me that affected me like nothing else could have. That which I loved beyond reason, a person who I had met moments ago, but for whom I was now ready to face anything, was in need. I charged the monster, racing toward me with a battle cry that rang echoes off the walls around me. What happened, I do not know. I found myself bleeding. My legs and left collarbone were shattered, but I was smiling. On the ground lay my enemy, its bovine head removed. The beautiful and magical creature who I loved beyond reason took my hand and looked into my eyes and said, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" she asks again. Was that so long ago? It seemed like it just happened. Now she says the same thing to me as we kneel across from each other at the Salt Lake Temple. Are you okay? I feel strange. I suppose such losses of reality are common in the terrible emotion of marriage. Yet it feels curiously recent, as if we have just arrived here from the monster's lair. Son, are you all right? I just answer, I do. The old man presiding over the ceremony has no doubt seen hesitation like this before in the Lord's house, and knows just how to handle a frozen groan. Even so, I cannot find my voice. I gaze at the opposite wall, in which the facing mirrors create the illusion of a progression of reflections shrinking into the eternities. And what is that? It seems to my dizzy mind as though far up the chain of mirrors an animal figure peers out from behind one of the distant mirrors, then is gone. I have a sense of déjà vu, or rather a flood of memories assails me. I recall all the things that had happened since my time in the maze, my mission to Arkansas, my graduating in English education from BYU, meeting this girl in a graduate class on Chaucer, images of our dating, a trip to Moab to run the river, and now here on marriage. All of those recollections play before my mind's eye as if I am watching a VCR in fast motion. But the memories are so fresh, as if they have been knit together anew, as if they are virgin and untried, newborn. Say yes, or I will, the old man says to me again. My wife looks at him and says a little shyly, he must say the words himself. Of his own will, or it does not count. My mother looks at my bride and gives a little lift of the eyebrow as if to say, all is well, dear, all is well. I remember my mom had become mother to us both, because my bride has no parents. The small and lovely woman across the altar from me smiles, and says to the old man in white, I want him to say it on his own, so I know he means it. He pats her on the arm and asks the question again. I looked at her and, overwhelmed by her presence, answered joyfully, I do. My bride is asleep, and I want to write this down, so I am sitting before the hotel desk, writing on the provided stationery. I feel as though my memories in the center of the labyrinth are fading. It is strange that it has taken me so long to write. And why is it so important to do right now, on my honeymoon? We understand from all those who visited the halls of that hollowed space that within only a few hours after leaving the maze, the memories of that center void disappeared. And yet for me it has been years upon years. But I must write before, and there's an ellipsis, 3 dots. And then it continues. What an imagination I had then! I just read the story I'd written above. Clearly the emotion and thrill of marriage had distorted and confused my mind. I remember the fear and panic of that sacred event in the holy house, and it's a wonder that I survived it all. I'll soon be reading to my little toddler, our honeymoon baby. He turned 18 months today. He's grown so big and strong. The doctor says he is in the 99.99 and Enzyme percentile of size and weight. My small, almost elfin wife can hardly lift him. My chest is broad and deep, and his arms are muscular for a little Tyke. He loves to charge around the house like a force of nature. He'll ram my thighs with his head, and with such a power that he nearly knocks me over. And when he's riled up, he is a devil to keep a hold of. I'm so proud of him. It is bedtime, too, and so we will go through our nighty-night ritual. I'll help him brush his teeth and put on his PJs. And then we'll sit on his bed, and he will snuggle up next to me and tell me to read his story of his da. I suppose he likes to think of me as his hero. So I'll pull down his favorite book, the big red one he keeps on the nightstand next to his bed, and read, Once upon a time in Spain there was a little bull, and his name was Ferdinand. That's the end of that story. I don't know if you couldn't have not noticed me crying in there, because I recently got married in a situation very like that. I mean, I didn't hesitate like that, but without saying too much, this can sometimes become more apparent to us than other times. And there are moments in our life, when this gives way and we see the startling clarity of the order of being. Things become visible that weren't before. You see the light of the sun. And you feel safety. And in this time of doubt, and fear, and despair, remember that light and that truth. Remember what you may have forgotten. Remember the deeper parts of life. Remember the things slumbering behind the shadows. And there's nothing left to say now